Sorry, yes, it was
So hi everyone, I hope you had a nice lunch. We're very pleased to welcome Rocío Baños Piñero to be our second keynote speaker. And Rocío is Senior Lecturer in Translation at the Centre for Translation Studies at University College London, where she teaches audiovisual translation and translation technology. And today she's going to talk to us about innovation in audiovisual translation, responding to new developments in an ever-changing landscape.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the organisers and UEA for having invited me to come here to talk about innovation in audiovisual translation. You have here an overview of my talk in line with the main theme of this symposium. I'm going to, the aim of this talk is to reflect on how innovation and experimentalism are pushing the boundaries of audiovisual translation and how the different partakers, mainly academia and the industry, have risen to the challenge. Because I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the different forms of audiovisual translation. I'll start by providing an overview of what is audiovisual translation and the different types of audiovisual translation, and then I'll move on to discuss recent developments and forms of innovation, how they have highlighted the increasing demand of audiovisual translation. I'll also discuss technological developments because it's closely related to innovation technology. And then I'll finish by highlighting some new trends in the consumption of audiovisual material. And then I'll finish with some reflections and conclusions. So what is audiovisual translation? Audiovisual translation is an umbrella term that it's used to refer to a wide range of practices involving the translation of audiovisual material. So audiovisual translation is about making audiovisual content accessible to people who cannot understand the source language. So that's what we refer to when we talk about linguistic accessibility. And when it comes to audiovisual translation as language transfer, we tend to distinguish between two main categories, subtitling and revoicing. In subtitling, the spoken output in the source language is going to be rendered as written output in the target language. So there is a change of mode from spoken into written. I assume most of you will be familiar with interlingual subtitling from a language A into a language B. Here you have an example from a TV series. It's a Netflix series called The Cable Girls. It's a Netflix production. It's a Spanish production, and Netflix UK broadcasts it subtitled into English. Subtitling does not only involve translating the subtitles, it also involves creating the subtitles. That's what we call spotting, originating, or time queuing, which means deciding when a subtitle is going to appear on screen and when it's going to leave the screen. So it involves several technical skills. We have other types of subtitling. We have opera subtitling, which I think there's a paper tomorrow on opera subtitling. So I won't talk about that much. And then we also have controversial practices such as fan subbing. Fan subbing, as probably you know, it's an illegal form of subtitling. It's subtitling done for fans by fans. It started with Japanese anime, but nowadays is quite popular with US TV series. So, as an example, the series Game of Thrones is quite popular all over the world, and some people who don't understand the source language might decide that they don't want to wait until the official translation has been released, or they don't want to pay for that official version, and what they do is they download the material illegally, and then they download the fan subs, and they're able to enjoy those products. There are other types of subtitling, but I won't discuss all of them. Moving on to revoicing, here there is no change of mode, so spoken output in the source language is going to render as well as spoken output in the target language. As in subtitling, there are different types of revoicing, the two most common being dubbing and voiceover. In dubbing, the original soundtrack is going to be completely replaced by a new one in the target language, so the target viewer can no longer hear the original exchanges. So here, using Venuti's terminology, the translator is invisible, and sometimes the target audience might even consider that what they're consuming is an original. I'm not sure how many of you will be familiar with dubbing, because at least in the UK it's not the preferred form of translation. So I've included an example here from another Netflix series. This one is called Stranger Things, and they've just released the second season, and it's been quite popular. And this clip is taken from, it has been compiled by Netflix, the provider, and they are quite proud of what they've done with this series. They have translated it into over 20 languages, and it's available in, I think, 190 countries all over the world. So this clip shows you some of those 20 versions are dubbed, and it shows you the same scene, and it changes from one language into another with dubbing. So.
She can talk. She said no and yes. Your 3-year-old sister says more. You're trying to get naked. Esa chica tiene serios problemas. Problemas mentales. ¡Eso sí! ¿No vieron? Apuesto que se escapó de Penhurst. ¿Dónde? El manicomio del condado Kearney. Hai molti parenti. Smettila. Sul serio, dai, pensaci bene. Spiegherebbe i capelli rasati. Il fatto che è così pazza. Perché ha fatto così? Demek istediğim o bir kaçak. Muhtemelen bir akıl hastası. Michael Myers gibi. Aynen öyle. Keşke buraya hiç getirmeseydik. O fırtınada mı bıraksaydık bir yani? Ja, wir waren auf der Suche nach Will, nicht nach einem neuen Problem. Komm, wir sagen es deiner Mama. Ja, würde ich auch sagen. Wer springt jetzt rum? Warum? Was ist falsch daran? Se supone que hoy no íbamos a salir, ¿recordáis? ¿Y qué? Porque si se lo digo a mi madre y ella se lo dice a la tuya y a la tuya... Nasıl yiyor? Tayga aşkın gençler. Sonradan tarafı. Bir olsa kaseler. だから今夜はあの子をここに止める。Mas deixa eu olhar o outro. Só me escuta. Pela manhã, ela dá a volta na minha casa, vai para a porta da frente e toca a campainha. A minha mãe vai atender e saber exatamente o que fazer. Elle la renverra à Penhurst ou bien là d'où elle vient. Après, on sera tranquille. Et demain soir, on pourra à nouveau sortir. Et là, pas d'obstacle. Cette fois, on retrouvera Will.
Okay, so in this case, dubbing in the same way as subtitling does not only involve translating the script, it also involves some technical skills. You couldn't see it properly here because the video was a bit, the audio wasn't going with the video, probably because of the internet, but dubbing involves lip synchrony. So when we replace the original with the translation, we need to do that in synchrony with the original images. So something that we need to take into consideration if the character on screen opens her mouth, we need to make sure that our translation mirrors that as well. So if there is an open vowel, we need to provide a translation with an open vowel. If there are bilabials, then we need to provide something similar so that the target viewer believes that that character is speaking in that particular language. The other type, voiceover, there is no replacement. What we have is an overlapping. So the translation is overlapped and the original spoken dialogue is still audible in the background. So here, like in subtitling, we know that we're facing a translation. There is a translation of the audiovisual material. And I have here another example from a documentary. It's a Horizon documentary shown on the BBC.
So there will only be cesium in the soil. How dangerous is this? How long will it remain in the ground?
The half-life of cesium is said to be close to 30 years. So for a long time, cesium will be the biggest problem.
Okay, so here we still have some problems of synchro, but it's not that serious in this case. So we know that these scientist, this is a Japanese scientist, is providing an answer in Japanese, and then on top of that we have the translation in English, which in the case of the UK, it's a convention that it's used in the UK but not in other countries. The voice talent revoicing this utterance has an accent, presumably a Japanese accent, but that is something that, for example, is done in the UK and not in Spain or in Italy. And the idea of voiceover is that it reinforces the sense of authenticity, and that's why it is used, for example, in non-fictional material such as documentaries. But in some countries, like for example in Eastern Europe, voiceover is used for tradition and for financial reasons to translate TV series or fictional products. So it's not only fiction. In the case of audiovisual translation, I've mentioned at the beginning that it's about making material accessible for those who don't speak the original language. But audiovisual translation is more than that. Audiovisual translation is also about making that material accessible to people with some kind of sensory impairment, be it visual impairment or hearing impairment. So in this sense, audiovisual translation also encompasses practices such as sign language interpreting of audiovisual content, subtitling for the deaf and the hard of hearing, in which case the subtitles need to provide information about the soundtrack, there's music, there's any noise, and also information about who is speaking, especially when there are several characters on screen. And then we have audio description for the blind and the partially sighted, so that the audience can also enjoy movies. We need to provide them with a description on screen. So they can, of course, go to the cinema and listen to the dialogue, but in between the dialogue, in the silences of the movie, we provide a description telling them what is going on screen, who is appearing on screen, what are they wearing, etc. So now that we have an idea of what I mean by audiovisual translation, before talking about innovation, we need to reflect a little bit about the evolution of this field, both as a discipline and as a professional practice. So as a discipline, although the first publications date back from the 1960s, it's a field that has greatly developed in the 1990s and in the 2000s. So it is a relatively young field. But most scholars would agree that it is now a consolidated field of research which can be easily separated from other fields like literary translation. And as a professional practice, it has experienced many developments recently. According to Bywood et al., they were marked by the cable and satellite television in the 80s, the DVD boom in the 90s, and more recently, by the growth of high-speed broadband and the Web 2.0. This has resulted in proliferation of audiovisual content online and the development of some platforms, for example, YouTube. YouTube has enabled users to upload any kind of material, so the generation of what we call user-generated content. Anyone can record a video and upload it to YouTube, and also video on demand services such as Netflix, Hulu, HBO Now, etc. And as a result, nowadays, audiovisual media is the preferred mode of communication of many companies, institutions, and individuals. If we think, for example, companies, if we go to Apple's website, they've recently launched their new iPhone. So we are going to find, in addition to loads of marketing material and text information about the new iPhone, we're going to find a video. And that video is provided with subtitles into many different languages. And just to show you an example of how this is shown on the Italian website of Apple.
more than a decade, our intention has been to create an iPhone that is all display, a physical object.
So the clip with subtitles into Italian, and that features on the main page of Apple Italy. And it's not only companies, different institutions like the European Union, United Nations have increased the amount of audiovisual content on their sites, and that content needs to be accessible. And it's also educational institutions. Nowadays, loads of institutions are offering online courses, and those online courses consist of videos, which sometimes are not accessible. And an example is this video, which is taken from a free online course delivered by Dan Juravsky from Stanford University, just to show you what I mean.
Hi, I'm Dan Juravsky, and Chris Manning and I are very happy to welcome you to our course on natural language processing. This is a particularly exciting time to be working on natural language processing. The vast amount of data on the web and social media have made it possible.
So these are just examples, but if we look at data, just highlighting the prevalence of video, we can see sources like Cisco's estimating that by 2021, 82% of the world's internet traffic will be video, or DMR YouTube report saying that nowadays over 400 hours are uploaded to YouTube every hour. Of course, not all that material is going to be translated, but some of it will. And this has resulted in the amount of audiovisual material needing translation to be on the increase. And this poses a challenge for companies, for institutions, for individuals who often have very little time to complete their translation, and apparently very little budget as well to spend on their translation. So they've been looking for solutions, and the two main solutions that they've looked at have been crowdsourcing and technology. In the case of crowdsourcing, it's been quite popular, especially in subtitling. And crowdsourcing here is understood as a collaborative, non-for-profit translation undertaken by a group of volunteers. And some people get confused between crowdsourcing and fund subbing, and they use them as synonyms, but they're not. Fund subbing is illegal. Crowdsourcing is normally initiated by the owner of the audiovisual material, who decides to give the material to the crowd to be translated. A very clear example of crowdsourcing in the case of audiovisual translation is the platform TED. They have loads of videos, and all the videos have subtitles, many of them into many different languages, and you have some statistics there from last week. But it's not only organizations like TED or NGOs that resort to crowdsourcing. For example, the European Commission launched a €1 million initiative to crowdsource subtitling to increase the circulation of European works. And according to them, they did that to reduce the cost of obtaining subtitles, I'm reading there, and increase the exposure of European films in video on demand services available in the EU. And here, when they're referring to European films, they're mainly referring to films that are not in English. So the idea is to increase the exposure of other European languages. This call was met with a lot of criticism from professional subtitlers. And for example, the European Association of Audiovisual Translation sent a letter to the European Commission regretting that they had to spend this amount of money to promote non-professional subtitling, which according to them will lead to the deprofessionalization of subtitling and audiovisual translation instead of spending it on professional subtitling. This call has been renewed, so apparently the letter wasn't very successful. And in 2017, there's been another call, very similar lines, calling for innovative solutions. And here they do mention high-quality film translation, This is something that wasn't mentioned in the previous call, as far as I'm aware. And they not only mention crowdsourcing, they also mention machine translation, which is probably even more controversial than crowdsourcing. But this takes me to my second point, which is the other solution that companies have resorted to deal with that increasing amount of material that needs translating, which is technology. And technology is often at the very heart of innovation in audiovisual translation, and it's very closely related to audiovisual translation, mainly due to the complexity of audiovisual text, of the process of translating an audiovisual text, and the nature of these texts. And in the same way as in the 90s, it was talk about the cultural turn. Scholars like Cronin or O'Hagan have talked about the technological turn in translation studies. And of course, in the case of audiovisual translation, scholars like B.F. Nintas have argued that it is perhaps the turn that has had a greater impact, at least in the case of subtitling. And to realize this, we only have to have a look at the software available to carry some of the tasks, especially those that I was referring to at the beginning of this presentation. So there is many tools available in the market to carry out subtitling tasks. There is professional software such as WinCaps, Swift, Fab. They're quite widely used. On the right-hand side, you can see a screenshot of WinCaps, the latest version of WinCaps, which is called WinCaps Quantum. And these tools will help you not only to translate, but also to do what I mentioned, the queuing, timing, or spotting of subtitles. So they have sophisticated features to tell you if your subtitle is too long, if the subtitle stays too long on screen. You can see the wavelength to synchronize your subtitles with the audio, etc. And perhaps because of this level of sophistication, these tools tend to be quite expensive, and that's why you also have freeware tools. Tools like IVSoup or Subtitle Workshop are widely used in training environments when there's no budget for tools, or also by fan-subbing communities. In the case of crowdsourcing communities, they often prefer cloud-based software, which is software you don't have to download and install. You just go to the online platform, enter your credentials, and you can just use the software. It tends to be quite easy to use. And an example is, in the case of TED, they use the platform Amara, and another example is Dotsub. So this kind of model is widely established and quite popular. And then going back to technology, lately there's been several research projects which have investigated the integration of translation technology and audiovisual translation. The focus has been mainly on subtitling, and as regards the technology, machine translation features highly, as well as speech recognition. So just to show you a couple of examples of the kind of projects that I'm referring to. There is this project, for example, Sumat, which has already finished, I think, in 2015. And this was a tool that was created to translate subtitles using machine translation. And it was subtitles for fictional products. And the idea was to use single machine translation and post-editing techniques. For those of you who are not familiar with machine translation, post-editing refers to the reviewing and editing of the output provided by machine translation to make sure that it matches the criteria wanted by the client. So if a client wants high quality human translation, then your edition of the machine translation material has to match that quality. Some clients just look for good enough machine translation output, which is very challenging. And this is one of the things that were investigated in this project. Also using machine translation is this project which is now underway. It's called Tramuk, and it's focused on the translation for massive online open courses. So one of the material that I was showing earlier on about the different educational videos. So they do mention here, I'm not sure if you can read, high quality. The aim is to provide high quality translation using machine translation of all types of text genre included in massive open online courses. And of course, one big part of that material is audiovisual content. Also focused on educational material is this project, Trans Lectures, which has finished, but the university coordinating has carried on developing the technologies, and in this case they integrate machine translation and post-editing with speech recognition. So what they do is they do the automatic transcription of lectures. So that video that I showed you with a lecturer explaining the PowerPoint presentation, the idea is to feed that into speech recognition tool. The tool will convert the speech into writing, into text, and that text will be used in the machine translation system and will be translated into another language. So we're talking here about translation from speech into writing. As you can imagine, the errors that you can get multiply even, because you have the errors that you get with speech recognition and the mistakes that you get with machine translation. But here I'm just talking about the technology and not right now about the results of these projects. So these three projects focus on subtitling, and in fact most of the technology available and research projects tend to have subtitling as a focus, and the reason is because subtitling is easier to automate because there are fewer stakeholders. In the case of dubbing or voiceover, you need dubbing actors, you need voice talents. There is an exception, at least that I am aware of. It's this project in which my department took part. It was led by the Universidad Autónoma in Barcelona, and the focus was on, again, machine translation, but also speech technologies, and on dubbing, voiceover, and audio description of documentaries, so revoicing. And one of the technologies that was implemented was speech synthesis. And speech synthesis works in the other direction if we compare it with speech recognition. So it's converting text into speech. And that is essential, for example, for blind people. If a blind person wants to use this computer, they need that kind of technology to know what they're doing. They need the text instructions to be converted into audio. So speech synthesis was used to produce the audio description for a documentary. So it was an artificial voice describing what was happening on screen. And you probably think, who would want to watch a documentary with an artificial voice describing what is happening on screen? Well, unfortunately, blind people don't have many options, and the alternative is either watching that documentary without audio description or watching that documentary with that artificial voice. And as a result, many of them, the users, were quite happy with that option. Many of these innovations are already applied by the industry. I won't explain the top part of these slides. It just refers to different companies providing subtitling services. I just wanted to highlight the emphasis that they put on automation. Everything is automated, everything is done quickly and efficiently. And most tools, as I said, focus on subtitling. One company in the Netherlands, MediaWen, which talks about automatic dubbing. And what they say is it implements text to speech and it generates human voice quality dubbing with gender and emotions. So it's an artificial voice, apparently with emotions. I haven't listened to it. I'll be very interested to find out. And in fact, I've contacted the company to see if I can see what they are referring to. And the very own BBC has launched a similar tool along those lines. It's called Auto, and they argue that it's a tool to dub video content automatically into multiple languages using text-to-speech voice synthesis. So they're using machine translation and speech synthesis. And they say that they've received very positive feedback. About 80% of the audience surveyed expressed support of the synthetic voice technology. And they acknowledge that machine translation and speech synthesis are by no means perfect, but they are good enough to allow non-English speakers watch BBC News report in their own language. So here again, the question of quality comes again, good enough. We're not talking about high quality, we're just talking about something that is good enough. And I have here a video just showing this service as well. It's interesting as well that it's targeted at journalists, so not at translators. So we no longer need translators to do this kind of job, which I think is an interesting point as well. So I'll show you the video, especially because it's delivered by a synthetic voice, so you can see what is meant.
BBC News are launching a pioneering new service called Today in Video. It's multilingual and it's using groundbreaking language technology. This allows us to offer more videos to audiences around the world.
Language technology has come a very long way, but in the recent years, with the development of smart gadgets and smart devices, it's progressed so fast that we now take it for granted. There's anything from autocorrection, predictive text, speech recognition, machine translation, and synthetic voices.
This is what usually makes money in the Dubai Air Show: sleek, shiny jet liners.
How does it work? First, we take an English language video. We upload the script. Then the computer translates it. Next, our journalists polish up the text to the BBC's high standards. Now, we want to voice it in a new language. We can choose our favorite synthetic voices. And voila, off it goes, and here you can watch it.
We're still developing the technology and we're still improving it, but with this project we want to push it even further. We want to develop new tools for the journalists so that they can translate video material much more easily and much more efficiently.
We are starting a pilot service in Japanese, with Russian soon to follow. We hope to add even more languages in 2016. From me and my fellow synthetic voices, goodbye.
Bye bye.
Okay, so you have an idea of what is meant by synthetic voices. And just going back to technology, there is another innovation, not that recent, that I find is quite relevant, because it's enabled audiovisual translation scholars to take into consideration viewers and to carry out reception studies. I'm referring to eye tracking technology. So there are more traditional instruments like surveys and questionnaires, but lately some scholars have resorted to eye tracking technology to find out more about the viewing process. So this kind of technology has enabled scholars to move from speculation to the observation of subjects. They are devices that normally can be worn like glasses, or sometimes you can put it here on the screen. It's just a different sensor that it's going to track your eye movements as long as you stay at a specific place on the screen and you just don't go somewhere else. And they offer metrics about visual information by measuring eye positions and eye movement. This kind of technology is widely used like in advertising and social sciences. For example, to track when you go to a supermarket, where do you look at? Things like that is widely used for that kind of research, market research. So in our case, it enables us to find out when the attention paid by viewers to the different parts of the screen, and of course to subtitles, or if we were studying dubbing, to lip synchrony as well. and it enables us to better understand viewers' cognitive process while watching, but also while reading the subtitles. So we can study things like reading speed, how long does it take an average viewer to read a particular subtitle, or the position of subtitles. Shot is taken from a study carried out by the BBC they call dynamic position of subtitles. So they wanted to check and compare the different eye gaze when reading traditional subtitles positioned at the bottom of the screen, and more dynamic ones positioned in this case closer to the speaker, and see what viewers thought and what happened with their eye movements. And so far I've discussed technology as a solution, but technology can also pose challenges. One of the areas that has experienced a great development in the past few years, since 2010, has been that of the provision of immersive forms of audiovisual content, be it in the form of 360-degree videos or virtual reality experiences. To enjoy those, you need a virtual reality headset, like the one picture there on the right. And basically, when you have that headset in, you can look into any direction, even behind, and you can enjoy the video or the virtual reality experience. Some devices also come with hand controllers, and the idea is to enhance that simulation of being in a virtual world. What is interesting about this is that these new formats and experiences pose challenges in terms of accessibility, both linguistic and sensorial. The first question is, most of these material is again created in English. It's going to need to be translated or adapted to different audiences. So what is the best audiovisual translation mode to translate this? And some will argue that it's dubbing, because dubbing is less intrusive and it promotes immersion, which is essential in these kind of products. However, dubbing is expensive. Some audiences are not used to dubbing and don't like it. And also dubbing cannot be enjoyed by some audiences like deaf and hard of hearing. So we need to subtitle. So subtitles have to be integrated in this kind of material. And the question is, where do we place subtitles, considering that we can look into any direction, so subtitles cannot be like at the bottom of the screen any longer, and also considering that the idea is to promote immersion and also to avoid motion sickness, which is often associated to wearing these kind of headsets. So there is a lot of research that needs to be done in this regard, and in fact the BBC has carried out some user tests, and according to the preliminary findings, they've only interviewed a few people, but they say that this head-up display with the subtitles always following the viewer is the most appropriate or the preferred way of showing subtitles in virtual reality. So it's still early days, but I think it shows the challenges that lay ahead. And just to conclude, some of these innovations also have an impact on the way we consume audiovisual material. In the past, we watched television as it was for some like a social event on the sofa with the family, etc. Nowadays, some people prefer to watch all the episodes of a whole series in one go on their own on a small screen. So all these developments are changing audience preferences, but also as regards audiovisual translation. I'm Spanish, and Spain is a dubbing country traditionally. If you go to any cinema, unless it's in a big city, the movies are going to be dubbed. So if you want to find something that it's subtitled in the cinema, it's going to be hard. However, newer generations prefer subtitling more and more. And this is perhaps why on-demand streaming media platforms such as Netflix are being so popular, because they give viewers the opportunity to decide if they want to watch it subtitled or if they want to watch it dubbed. And it's not only in dubbing countries like in Spain. And I found this really interesting, the fact that Netflix UK offers the TV series that I mentioned at the beginning, Cable Girls, not only subtitled into English, but dubbed into English in the UK. Probably, if you have Netflix UK, you would never think of looking at this option, but it is an option that it's available, and apparently it's not just for Americans, as some people have argued, because it's available in the UK. So I just wanted to show this fragment because I thought it was very interesting. It's one of the first things that I've seen dubbed into English apart from animation. The beginning is the same scene. The beginning is Spanish with subtitles in English, and then the second part is the dubbing, just for you to check. I'm going to try to play it from my computer because it's probably synchronization will be better.
Este no es mi sitio, renuncio. Pero, Lidia, ¿te importa entregarle mi nombre que me pide? Lidia, si es por lo de la llamada, yo puedo hablar con Sara. No quiero que hables con ella. No, si ella puede ayudar. Yo no quiero que me ayudes, ni tú, ni Ángeles, ni ninguna de vosotras. ¿Pero por qué si nosotras somos tus amigas? No tengo amigas, Marga. Pero yo pensé que nosotras... Pues no. Porque una persona que conoces desde hace 2 días no es tu amiga, ni la ayudas ni confías en ella porque no la conoces de nada. Y tú no sabes quién soy yo.
Are you leaving? I don't belong here. I'm quitting. Can you return that for me, please?
Lydia, if it's about the call, don't worry. I can talk to Sarah.
I don't want you to.
But Angelus can help you.
I don't need any help, not from you or Angelus or any of the other girls.
But Lydia, we're all your friends.
I have no friends, Marga.
But I thought that we...
Well, no. Someone who you've known for just 2 days is not your friend, Marga. You don't trust her or help her because you don't know her. You don't know who I am.
Okay, so that's the dubbed version of oh, it's gone. Oh, come on. Okay, so I think one of the other aspects that we need to take into consideration is that the impact of these on-demand streaming media platforms is still to be seen as regards audience preferences, but also as regards the profession. In the case of Spain, for example, I'm aware that professional translators have already complained or reported about tighter deadlines with these new providers, which have an impact on quality. Also lower rates and sometimes a change in conventions because they have very strict guidelines that they want their translators to follow. And just to give you an idea, for example, traditionally subtitles were normally have a maximum of 40 characters per line, and Netflix allows characters of 42. Lines of 42 characters per line, so they are changing the conventions as well. And just to conclude, I hope that I've shown that audiovisual translation is an extremely innovative and dynamic field, which requires a proactive approach from trainers and researchers. We need to stay abreast of new developments, but also partner with industry to take part in those developments and have a say in and discuss things like the deprofessionalization of audiovisual translation, the dehumanization of translation with so much automation and so on. And we all knew that audiovisual material plays an essential role in communication nowadays, but accessibility is still an issue. Technology has come a long way, especially to target this, but there are still many underexplored areas, like the ones I've just referred to, but also many of these tools, again, the emphasis is on automation. But what about the needs of translators? Very few tools take into consideration what the translator needs to carry out audiovisual translation. and even what the audience needs. And then there are many existing challenges in the form of virtual reality, new formats, new platforms, but also, for example, as regards quality versus quantity. I've mentioned in a couple of cases where projects refer to high quality, but so far it's like, okay, there is this massive amount of data that needs to be translated, let's make it accessible. And let's make it accessible to as many viewers as possible. But I think it's time to start thinking about quality and start thinking that, yeah, let's make it accessible, but with a level of quality that it's at least equal to that of the original text. And that's all from me. If you have any comments or any questions, I'll be very happy to discuss them.
Thanks very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Two questions, and I think they're connected. And the first one is that when I first looked at ABT, I understood that one of the problems from the point of view of history is that ABT is viewed as part of the post-production. So essentially the original language production gets done, and then it gets kind of thrown over whoever the ABT team are, and then it gets post-processed. Second question, which I think is connected, is that, and it applies, I think, to textual translation as well, is that technology seems to be mostly viewed as a deterministic evolution of translation. Here's the technology, we have to accept what it does, and it's not presented in like a socially constructed framework. So I think recently Maeve Olahan in Manchester has written about how there are, for example, the Scott framework, social construction of technology, there are frameworks in science and technology studies where we raise the question, do we just accept technology as it's thrown to us by the technologists, or do we as practitioners within a discipline say, hey, as you hinted at just at the end there, we have our own needs as linguists, as professionals in our own domain, and maybe the technology you're giving us isn't quite what we need to achieve what we need as linguists.
Yeah, I think the two very interesting points there as regards the post-production. Yeah, and I think that is one of the main problems of audiovisual translation, and I think this happens with other forms of artistic creation. That when you create something, sometimes you don't think that is going to be translated, and you don't think of what the problems may be. But in the case of audiovisual translation, it will make things so much easier if that was done, especially if you think of Hollywood productions. They know that their material is going to be translated. And for example, companies like Disney are aware of that, and perhaps they do try to integrate a little bit that in their pre-production, because they identify if there are any issues. And for example, Disney has even recorded new images to suit their Asian target viewers. So that is done in animation, that is done in video games, but it is not done in films. We need to think as well of films, like if you think of Woody Allen, ask Woody Allen to change a scene because that scene will be really problematic to be translated. So, of course, we need to bear in mind some parameters. But there's been research done, especially by Pablo Romero Fresco, on what he calls accessible filmmaking, and it's just about a little bit of awareness of thinking, okay, you are creating a product, but bear in mind that your product needs to be accessible. And we're not talking only about languages, we're talking about, subtitles, audio description. If there is loads of dialogue and loads happening on screen, bear in mind that blind people won't be able to enjoy your movie. That's all. It's just an awareness which many creators don't have. So that's a very interesting area which has just started to be researched. And in fact, this scholar, he was at Roehampton University, but is now back in Spain, in Vigo. He created a movie that was accessible and showed the main differences and what needed to be taken into consideration. And completely agree with the second view, and that's what I've tried to hint here, and I'm also familiar with Olohan's work. That I think that's the problem, that we just say, oh, you know, again, machine translation, and we need to adapt, and we need to try to post-edit, and I think, and that's why I said as well, we need to try to take part into these research projects to say, this is what we need. And I often try to collaborate with the industry and say, you know, this tool might be great for you, but it doesn't work for us. And they know that they need translators. So it's not that myth from the beginning that, oh, you know, we won't need, they know, and they know that they should keep them happy, but sometimes they just don't think that they need to listen to us. But definitely I see technology as an aid, and I think that's the way we need to show it to students as well, because they will be the ones negotiating with companies.
Kind of following on from that, when you translate for subtitling, there's actually quite a lot of editing involved, isn't there? Because you need to cut down, usually you need to cut down the text so that it actually fits into the subtitling space. And I was wondering if there's any attempt at the moment for the technology to, you know, do any of that editing, or does the automated, do the automation tools just translate it and then the post-editor cuts it down?
Yeah, that is another thing that I wanted to discuss, but I didn't have time. Those tools normally don't take into consideration the specificities of audiovisual translation, and you wonder, what's the point? If then I have to then come a line that it's this big that I have to so that it fits. But it's not only that. I mean, I would prefer to do the editing myself rather than leave that to a machine. But segmentation that a machine could do easily. You know, subtitles need to be presented in a way so that they are easy to read. And these tools don't even, well, they could do it, but developers haven't thought about that. So it's those kind of features that would make the life of the subtitler easier that they haven't thought about, because they're just obsessed with, you know, automation, quick, fast, and so on.
Just comments, but you were distinguishing between crowdsourced subbing and fan subbing. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you were aware of, for a lot of, it started with Korean dramas, but has moved to other Asian dramas, including Taiwanese and Japanese and that's Southeast Asian dramas. There used to be relatively famous fan subbing website that you would go to, and then actually now the broadcasters from the original countries have made a contract with these fan subbing websites, and they have created fan subbers into crowdsourced subbing. So each TV show will have a team of fan subbers who will work and sub all the episodes, and they'll go out, but then they have commercials in them that will make profit for the original content providers. So it's still not professional subtitlers, but then the content is still being subtitled and being released at a much faster pace than would normally happen.
Yeah, what's the name of the platform?
The two biggest ones are Viki, V-I-K-I, and Drama Fever.
Yeah.
But those originally, because I remember being 12 or 13 when Viki was still illegal, and finding it then. But then now that it's become legitimate, but the quality of the translation has not improved. And particularly translation notes are always included, very detailed translation notes in the subtitling themselves.
Yeah, which is characteristic of fan subbing. Yeah, but it's interesting how you know, companies learn, and in fact many companies have tried to integrate crowdsourcing in an attempt. Some of them say who is going to better translate, Facebook has done it, who is going to better translate our platform that our fans who, are familiar with the terminology, etc., etc. But of course, others say, well, they do it because of the money, because they don't want to spend money on that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that shows, how you can integrate from, the fan subbing into crowdsourcing. Thank you for pointing that out.
I think that might be a good place to stop if no one's got any other questions. No, great. Thank you very much.